What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Southern U podcast, where we try to educate landowners in the Southeast on all things land-related. Everything from hunting and ag, timber, farm, everything in between. My name is Taylor McMurtry, and I'm joined, as always, man in the middle right here, the AL Deer legend himself, Matt Brock, Habitat First Properties.
Woo, what's going on, Matthew?
I'm here.
You're here?
Matt's here.
You're back there.
I'm back here.
You.
And we got Jeremy Ferguson of Tutland / Wildlife Consulting Services.
What's happening?
Who is also driving. He's behind the wheel right now.
I am behind the wheel.
Yep. So we're going to try something. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we are trying to do a mobile, on-the-road, rolling podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, we
truly
can,
mobile in every sense of the term.
We can hunt mobile, so we might as well be able to podcast mobile.
Yes, exactly. And we'll turn everybody down just a fuzz. Think we're all just a little
Just
hot.
a touch hot?
Yeah. All right, there. That might be a little bit better, maybe. So today we have spent all day at the co-owner of Tethered Nation. Actually, I think they're just Tethered now. They dropped it now. It's just Tethered. Tethered Tree Saddles, Ernie Power, at his personal property here in just outside of Columbia, Tennessee, and doing a little habitat consult and just kind of seeing how we could improve his property for wildlife hunting opportunities and nesting habitat for turkeys, and really just trying to improve it for habitat all the way around.
That's it.
Yep, and had a good time too. It was a cool place. Lots and lots of for such a small property. Had a lot of cool things.
A lot of deer.
A lot of deer.
A lot of deer.
And we saw some turkeys that we couldn't even hardly run off.
Yeah.
But a whole lot of fun though. So now we're on our way back, and we just thought it'd be kind of cool to try to make the most of our time while we're all in one location, and see if we can't do a podcast.
I want to go there.
Pritchard's Distillery.
Yes, sir.
Yep. What do we hit? What highway? We're
on I-65
yeah,
south.
I-65 south. That's right. Yeah. So we roll down I-65, seeing some of the beautiful
Jamie Johnson song.
Beautiful rolling hills of southern Tennessee. It really is pretty country out here, man. Like it. And Jeremy's going to move here and just not tell anybody.
One day. Yep. Yep. The wife and I have discussed southern Tennessee in the past, and it's getting higher and higher on my list as our population in North Alabama grows.
Yep. That's not slowing down anytime soon, that's for sure. But today, I think what we'll do with this episode here is we're going to be talking about Wildlife Consulting 101. And I know you may be thinking, not necessarily something that you plan on doing, if you're a landowner or whatever, like I'm not a consultant, why do I need to know about this? But I do think that it's kind of interesting, and it could probably shed some light on the clientele side of things, not necessarily the one doing the consulting, but the one that might be in need of consulting or in need of habitat improvements, and how to go about that. What questions to ask, what things need to be considered.
How not to pay too much.
Yeah, make sure that you don't overpay for, these services and those sort of things. So happen to have two guys that do that for a living in the truck with us. So I thought it'd be kind of cool.
And we can't get away.
Nope, can't get away. We're all here. So you're a captive audience. That's what I'd like to say. So, as always, you guys know how this works. If you've been listening to the podcast any length of time, we cover about 5 questions, and once those questions get answered, we wrap this thing up and call it a day. So, gentlemen, you guys ready? We throw some
always.
stuff at you?
As ready as we're going to be.
If you got it. You're always ready.
We're never fully ready because we don't know what the questions are.
I just did my first consulting job today, so I got this now.
There you go. Yeah, he's pretty much
He did pretty good, too.
Yeah. Yep. If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
That's a fact.
That's what I'm saying. So, with that being said, we'll just jump right in. First question here is, when a client inquires about consulting services, what is the first thing you need to know in order to potentially help them?
Who wants to go first?
Not all at once.
Well, I mean that's a loaded question. I immediately jumped to some things that's probably not top of the list. Number one, does he own the property?
Yeah.
Number two, how much property does he have? Number three, where is it?
Yeah. So
that wrap all that up into one, and that's the few things I need to know up front.
Yeah, so like when your phone rings and someone says, "Hey, I'm Billy Bob, and I need to know how to improve my whitetail population on my property. What do I need to do?"
Well, he answered one of the questions there. One of my first questions is typically, what are your objectives? What are we managing for? What are we trying to improve upon? And just telling me I want to manage for whitetail deer, that's not specific enough. I need one or two very specific objectives, and then we move from there.
I want to see more deer. I want to see bigger bucks or something.
I want to increase the population of quail. I want to increase nest
deer.
success for turkeys.
Gotcha.
Something detailed.
Yep.
All right.
Detailed objective.
So you need a detailed objective from them, and then you said something about location too, just to make sure that, like, hey, if you're 12 hours away, it's not that we can't do it, but we just got to discuss some things.
Well, and it also the location will also determine whether their objectives are reasonable or not.
That's exactly right. If you call Matt or myself and say, hey, my goal is to grow a 300-pound, 200-inch whitetail. I live in Escambia County, Alabama. I'm going to tell you, good luck.
Yeah.
I mean, look, could it happen? Sure. But, the location, the native habitat around, the soil types where you are, they're all going to play a role. And your specific location is going to tell us a lot about that to start with.
Yes. Yep. Having that location information will let us know if your objectives are attainable, if they're reasonable. Because a lot of what we do, I feel like at times, is toning people down to a more reasonable objective.
Absolutely.
Which can be hard to do at times.
It can. TV, and look, here we are on social media, but TV, social media, magazines, over the course of the last 20 years have given people, especially in the South, unrealistic expectations of what can be produced off of, one, their property in general, whether you've got large acreage or not, but especially giving folks unrealistic expectations on what they can produce off of small properties where they have little or zero control of what's happening from a landscape level or a population level.
Yep, because you can do all the habitat improvements that you can afford and provide everything that deer need, and if deer are not reaching the age to express their potential, then you're just dumping all that money and all those resources into something that's never going to give you what you truly want.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's good to note, because there is a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of things blown out of proportion, and people get frustrated. I mean, we live in such a microwave society now. It's like, if I hire you to come and improve my habitat so that I can, grow a 200-inch deer in Alabama, and all of a sudden I don't do that in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, and I still don't have it, people tend to get frustrated. But it just kind of is what it is.
It is.
Even with large landowners, one of the first things I tell them, if we're doing deer management and they want to improve the quality of deer, whether it be body mass, antler score, all those things kind of go hand in hand. But one of the first things I tell them is, this is not going to be immediate results. Give me a minimum of 4 to 5 years before we start to fully realize what this place can do.
You've got to have generational change in the wildlife. Our human generation is much longer, but you need between 5 and 10 generations to really express full potential.
When
it's rarely going to happen in 5.
Right.
But between 5 and 10, generally you can you can do that.
So, and what we're talking about is once you start making all these habitat improvements and you get your deer herd in check, sex ratios in balance, and that kind of thing, from that point forward, what you're looking for is the change from fawns that are born into that better habitat. Does that are lactating in that better habitat, dropping those fawns, and those fawns getting off to a very good start from the get-go. When they reach the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old age classes is when you start to see the differences.
Yep.
So you can't come in and make, large-scale habitat improvements for deer that are 3 years of age and expect them to do crazy things at 5. They haven't grown up in that type of environment. They were introduced into it, those changes, basically midway through their life.
Yep.
Right.
So it is definitely a generational thing.
And at that point, once you've seen those generational changes take place, people get all excited about, well, we need to start taking this deer, we need to start taking this doe. Until you see generational change and health change over generations, really shooting specific bucks, shooting specific does doesn't play as big a role until you've reached that point. We had a good conversation with Mark Brenner yesterday about that. Only when you have allowed your deer to reach maximum potential as a herd can you start really fine-tuning specific animals out of the population. Now, you're not going to make genetic differences, but you are going to be able to make resource decisions.
Right.
So do I want to – I'm in this program for 6 years deep. I've got a lot of mainframe 10s or deer with extra points, and I've got these mature 6s and 7s over here. We're not going to change the genetic makeup of the herd by taking those deer, but if you take those deer, you can allow the resources that those deer are taking up to go to other deer that may be expressing better potential.
Yeah, because if you're trophy managing, there's a percentage of bucks in each age class every year that you have to remove. So, like Jeremy was saying, you're not changing the genetic makeup of that population by any stretch, but you are allocating resources to deer with a higher potential at certain age classes. And rarely, very rarely do I promote what people would consider to be culling in a free-range herd. Selective harvest, I guess some people could argue, is the same type thing, but it's not an effort to change genetics. You're not going to change the genetics.
It's resource management.
It's resource management. That's exactly what it is.
Yep. That's a totally different view. You know what I mean? When people think culls, they're like, well, I don't want this animal to pass down its genetic material. You know what I mean? I'm removing that from the equation, but you're really not.
And the hot topic, and we got a question from a client and a friend of mine, Blake Brazil, down in southwest Alabama, where they've started seeing a lot of spike on one side bucks, and that's common for us in Alabama. But they were asking how to handle those deer, and in reality, it's not a buck problem per se. It's a population problem. Matt and I discussed it pretty in depth, and the reason for most of that, not all of it, but most of that, is you have bucks still competing for does that have come in late during or just prior to antler cast time, and they're causing damage to the pedicles. And so that's why you're getting a lot of those spike on one side deer. They, in their situation, they need to reduce their deer numbers by quite a bit, and really try to balance that out and get some of those does off the landscape so that over time they can have a more concise rut.
Well, that's what I mean. Even Al, on our last episode, Temechko from Vitalize, we were talking about that, and he said a lot of times the situation is you either need to plant more food, harvest more deer, or both.
Yep.
And
a lot of times it's both.
Yeah, a lot of times it's both. And I would say the majority of Alabama is probably both. you know,
There's some places that have lower deer populations in Alabama, and they struggle to grow their deer population. But shoot, man, the last couple of site visits that I've been on in Alabama are grossly overpopulated.
Yeah.
Now, you know,
Unbelievable.
I'm talking like deer numbers that you wouldn't expect to see.
Oh yeah, on the last, actually one of you guys that reached out to us about doing a consult in South Alabama,
Yeah.
the Saco area.
That's some of the highest deer densities I have seen where there wasn't a significant health problem.
Well,
right. I mean, the deer are relatively healthy.
Relatively, yeah.
I mean, they don't look unhealthy.
They're not meeting their potential.
No, they're certainly not meeting their potential, but they've got some really heavyweight bucks on there. But a lot of that, I feel like, is just due to the age structure. They've got a lot of old deer on there in the 6, 7, 8-year-old age class. So you're going to get some heavyweight deer.
Yep.
Gotcha. So moving on here, this second question, what do you see as the main difference in doing habitat work or consulting in the South as opposed to other parts of the country? And that could be a little bit of a loaded question. I don't know how much outside of the Southeast you guys have been able to do, but if so, what do you feel like the main difference is there?
To me, and I think I've managed or consulted on properties in 11 states or 12 states now. Number one for the South to me is tract size. We are generally, Matt and I, and the clients that we work for, generally have large tracts of land. I mean, it's very few that we work for that are a few hundred acres. Most of them are 1,000 or multiple thousands of acres. That gives you, the ability to do quite a bit. Most of the tracts that I have worked on out in the Midwest have been a few hundred acres. Texas was a little different story. They had big tracts when I was doing some work out there. But number two is also mindset. Other states I've worked in, neighbors would cooperate more than they will in the South. That's two that jump out at me.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the soil and the deer, the differences that we have there just naturally.
Yeah, there's definite differences in, the native habitat types that are throughout the country and how they would be managed. But it all boils down to, for whitetail deer anyway, understory management. It's all about what's growing out of the ground. And in the South, that involves a lot of timber management and prescribed fire.
Yep.
Soil disturbance and those kind of things. But when you get out into the Midwest where you've got more open environments, you're not dealing with the same animal.
Yeah. And one thing that's very, very different, I've talked to a couple of foresters about it, small scale logging operations is very common up in the Midwest and the Northeast, other states. Where we are, you don't have small scale timber operations, period, anymore. If you do, it's a guy running a short wood truck that's trying to make enough money to pay his bills day in, day out. It's not big, it's not commercial logging crews. Now I even struggle to get crews to come cut 40, 60 acres. There's so few loggers, so much wood on the landscape that these logging crews are able to pick the tracts that are cream of the crop.
And I think since you mentioned that, Jeremy, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I think because of the differences in timber products and the market, we've got to look at managing landscapes for wildlife differently than we have in the past. Because it is no longer economically advantageous for a landowner to have smaller blocks of timber in various age classes. Because they can't get anybody to do anything with it.
Right.
So, the timber production, it suffers. Wildlife habitat suffers. So you're basically, those are two of the primary objectives when meeting with most landowners. I either want to grow timber and have wildlife to hunt, or I want to have wildlife to hunt and grow some timber. You know, they're usually one or two.
And I'm going to throw a little shade. And look, we make money off of it, but I'm still going to throw shade at it. One of the biggest hurdles we have to overcome from these small pockets of timber that we're trying to deal with are because of federal cost share programs.
Mm-hmm.
They fund a lot of landowners doing a lot of small scale stuff without the foresight of understanding what it's going to take to make that operationally feasible 15 to 20 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Matt and I, have talked to her blue in the face to some of these folks that handle these programs, and it doesn't look like they're going to change anytime soon. But like where we hunt, in the late 90s, I think the 2 or 3 counties where Matt and I hunt planted the most pine trees of any of the counties in the state of Alabama, and right now they're thinning age.
And you can't thin them.
You can't thin them. There's no pulpwood market.
Mm-mm.
So that timber is standing there self-thinning, dying, and we've still got cost share programs that's planting a lot of trees the same way, same spacing in those counties. Now they have changed some things up where they're planting these trees on a wider spacing and trying to alleviate that.
Yep.
But that is a recent change.
They're now going with a higher quality seedling at a wider spacing and trying to,
they're trying to grow pulp basically as fast as they can.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a different game than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, those are good points. I mean, obviously, I'm not a consultant and don't claim to be, but I would imagine, when we touched on it a little bit, but just the differences in, topography, soil conditions, climate, I mean, all that kind of stuff would make things much different, not necessarily more difficult, but just much different, Here in the South, we talk about it a lot, but certain parts of the state, the coastal plain area, you've got, I mean, what appears to be beach sand. I mean, it's just sandy soil, and then
because it was beach sand several thousand years ago.
There you go. Because a flood happened,
Yeah.
We won't talk about that, though.
Yeah, like the fossils we just found on top of the hills in Tennessee today.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, there's no explanation for how that got there other than a flood.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like that, deal with it. I don't care. I mean, and then you move up, farther north in the state, especially in Alabama, you start getting into the red clay, red dirt stuff. And then as you continue on to where we're at in North Alabama, places like Jackson County, parts of Madison County, Cherokee County, I mean, you've got really, boulders,
big limestone rock.
Yes, rock. And
on the edge of the Cumberland Plateau, it's just limestone rock.
And, those are vastly different soil types. And, it can make things a lot more difficult depending on where you're located within the state. So, it's definitely different. This third question here. At what point should a landowner consider the guidance of a professional habitat specialist? Like not necessarily us, but I'm just saying, at what point does a landowner go, and this is kind of out of my realm of, my understanding or my abilities, and I need to call somebody?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of information out there for landowners right now, and they can gain a lot from doing their own research and, reading articles and listening to podcasts and all those things. But if they want site-specific recommendations that are dealing with their property and their situation, I mean, look, it's like if I have some medical emergency, I go seek out a doctor. If I guess I'm trying to consider myself to be a jack of a lot of different trades, but You know, there's some home projects I'm not going to tackle. I'm calling a carpenter, or I'm calling a plumber, or an electrician. You know, if you want to take your wildlife management to the next level and, you know, get the best bang for your buck, I believe having a plan in place and somebody helping you guide your decisions is very beneficial.
Yeah.
I almost answer that question tongue in cheek is, you know, are you wanting to do it better than you're doing it yourself? You know, at that point, that's when you call somebody, because you're always going to fall a little bit short if you don't, you know, have experience in that field. I mean, my gosh, if I'm planting food plots and I've got a soil question, I don't fumble through it. You know, I call somebody that knows.
Right.
I'm not a soil expert. I know enough that I can plant my plots and plant my crops, but every now and then I run up against something that I'm just, you know, it's a head scratcher.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's
reach
like,
out to somebody else that knows.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, we have an incredible wealth of resources at our disposal. I may call a chemical rep to talk about a specific herbicide, you know, application. Even though I'm a you know, certified chemical applicator, there's certain things that I need to ask somebody else.
Yeah.
There's always opportunities for us to learn as well, and when we need to learn something about a specific topic, we have the people to call and talk to and try to get those questions answered.
Well, I think, too, it's just like anything else, you know, there's this ongoing debate within your own mind, and it comes down to a confidence issue, I think, but it's like, you know, do I save money and I do this myself, or do I pay someone else to do it, which obviously is going to cost money, but it will most likely, almost certainly, be done better. Now,
And look,
there are situations where that's not true necessarily, but when you feel like you're confident in your own abilities, you're confident in your understanding, then, you know, if you have the means of doing so, then do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you don't, the money that, you know, I learned this, you know, kind of applying this a little different spin, but like I learned this when we built our house. You know, going into that project, it was like, all right, there's some things here that I can do myself, and there's some things that I'm not willing to even attempt. And as we got deeper into that project, it was like, man,
I'm glad I called somebody to do that.
Yes, yeah. And you know, it's like I need to go out. I need to be doing what I know how to do and making money doing what I do.
Absolutely.
And somebody else needs to be over here doing what they do and, you know, doing it right, making money, instead of, you know, usually things get done better and, you know, generally speaking, it's done with more efficiency. You know what I mean? It's done at a faster rate and done at higher quality. So, you know, there were several situations just in building our house where it was like, yeah, I thought we were going to paint. I mean, I can use a paint roller. I can use a paintbrush. But what's it worth if it takes me 4 months to paint this house?
Well, I painted my own house, and I'll never do it again, ever.
You know.
So I think it's applicable to any business.
What is that in the road?
I don't know, but we
hit it wide, slap
we're
open.
going to have to try to miss it.
Installation? What is that?
You know, a bag of something.
I don't know.
Cotton candy?
Let's go get it. It was paint. But, you know, it's like in the real estate business. You know, if somebody calls me to sell their house, that's not what I do.
Right.
You know, there's much more knowledgeable people, agents in our agency to handle selling a house. Now, you want to sell a recreational tract or a farm or timberland? Yeah, I'm your huckleberry. But, you know, not a house. You know, everybody has their own specialty, I guess.
Right.
But, I mean, Matt and I have both been in situations where we've even followed up behind very well-known, established consulting biologists and foresters here in the Southeast where those folks came from out of this general area. And I mean, just putting it honest, they made some mistakes. They did some things that shouldn't have been done in the habitat where they were at, or in the setting that they were in, and it's just because they don't live here, work here every day.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily that the management practices they recommended were bad practices,
right?
But they're not applicable where they were applied.
They were at.
Yep.
And look, I mean, it's what it is. Would I go to Canada and start writing a plan for somebody?
Nope.
No. If somebody tried to hire me, I'd try to find somebody up there that could help them. But more and more, you see folks that want to be all, do all, and if folks are trying to be all and do all, chances are, they're not going to be as equipped to handle some situations as they are others.
Right.
They may have deer pegged, but may not really have full grasp on timber.
Right.
I mean,
sure.
you never know. But you have to vet the sources that you're using for information.
Right.
And there's nothing like using somebody that's close to home.
Yeah.
As long as they have a good reputation.
Right.
And do good work.
Well, I've said this forever. I mean, even when I was at the church and stuff, like, it seems to be this.
Sorry.
What?
They just opened and closed the door on that van up there, driving 70 miles an hour down the interstate.
There you go. But it's almost like people are just afraid. They're scared to death to just say the words like, I don't know. It's just like everybody is under so much pressure to be an expert at any question that's ever presented to them, instead of just being honest and going, hey, I don't know, but if you'll give me some time, let me make a few phone calls. Let me go. Like,
I'm
don't
that way
know
with
everything.
waterfowl. If you need habitat management, understory management for deer and turkey, I can help you. But if you call me about a waterfowl question, I'm going to say I will help you, but I'm calling somebody else to help me.
Yeah.
Or I'll give them a referral to somebody else.
Right.
I'm certainly not going to make a fool of myself and make management recommendations for something I don't know that I'm talking about.
Sure. Yep. Let's see, rolling right along here. Question number 4. What do you think the biggest hurdle is when dealing with landowners in the South? I know we maybe touched on that a little, but, is there anything that landowners in the South present as a challenge specifically? It's like a little bit more like, I know you mentioned, hey, for whatever reason, it just seems like in the South, neighbors just don't really want to get along generally.
I was going to say the biggest hurdle is cooperation. And, I don't mean that. I don't mean that either landowner is necessarily wrong for wanting to do anything the way they're wanting to do it. But I think that as a general rule of thumb, it is very difficult to accomplish objectives in the South when you've got such lengthy rifle seasons, and some landowners wanting to manage for a certain age class and some landowners don't give a flip. It's much easier to manage for large deer in states with shorter seasons because there's not as much opportunity for people to shoot them for 3 months.
That's right.
I think that is the biggest challenge managing properties in Alabama specifically, is people get disappointed when they do all this work and then they don't see the fruits of all that labor because everything they're trying to protect gets shot somewhere else. And like I said, I'm not saying that the neighbors are wrong. It's just frustrating to the guy that's trying to accomplish that.
Yep.
And, that seems to be a great or a large hurdle to overcome, which is why we, a lot of times, like, when I met with we met with the guys down there at Seiko and we meet with other people, I ask them, what are your neighbors doing? If you're wanting to do these things and grow deer to 4 or 5 or 6 years of age, what are your neighbors doing? Because if you don't know what they're doing, this may be a futile effort.
Yep. And I've said it time and time again, from a real estate standpoint, I even deep dive into the neighbors when I know somebody is looking to buy, a recreational track, and they're going to put a bunch of money into it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to manage. Oh, we're going to deep dive on those neighbors because they may ruin the whole thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I
it may not be the property for them.
I hate to say ruin, but I mean really that's what it does.
Yeah, I mean
it ruins their neighbor's experience.
Yes.
It doesn't ruin the property; it just ruins the experience.
Right.
And that's tough to swallow when somebody spends, $500,000 or more on a piece of property, and they just can't enjoy it because what's taking place right across the property line.
Well, I mean, and I would, not that I'm taking up for either one, but it is difficult, especially if you are a landowner and somebody else comes in there going, hey, I want you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, okay, that's fine, but I own this. This is mine. I'll do what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like,
and I think a lot of the issue is people approach it wrong.
Right.
Yeah, they
do.
approach it just like that.
Yes.
That's right. Hey, look, I'm buying this property beside you, and these are my expectations out of you. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You can't just purchase a piece of property, move in, and say this is what we're going to do. I think it has more to do with building that relationship and just educating folks.
I helped a guy buy a track up in North Alabama a couple months ago, and we sat down and talked to the neighbors, and we posed those questions. Hey, how do you guys handle deer harvest? How do y'all do this? How do y'all do that? Because this particular purchaser didn't want to buy a track that was just right next to somebody that was, quote unquote brown it's down type club, and the neighbors weren't actually big large landowners. It's going to work out well, but that I think that's number one, and probably maybe answer 1A is almost a lot of landowners that I have worked with, and this has been through my whole career, whether it's from daddy, granddaddy, TV, something they've read, they already have a chip on their shoulder and think they know more than you do.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll tell you the guys that don't generally act that way, the extremely successful, wealthy folks that own big tracts, that understand they are very good at doing what they do to make money, and there's somebody out there that's very good at making decisions on how to manage land.
mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, there's an ass for every seat.
Right.
Some of those folks, the bigger landowners that I have, man, they want you to tell them what to do. They're going to follow it. It's almost that median landowner that's like, no, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
I can handle this by myself.
Right.
You tell them how to do some things, or how you would do some things. They're like, no, I don't want to do it that way.
Right.
I still fight with one particular landowner year in, year out. If we weren't close, and by that I mean he and I, didn't have such a good working relationship, I wouldn't work for him anymore, because I plant food plots on his place twice a year. We're doing them the wrong way. The deer eat them up. He won't shoot enough deer. It's kind of the head, just banging your head against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But
Is what
it
it
is
is.
what it is. And a lot of times, a big hurdle for Matt and I know Matt's going to follow me with this one, is when we go in and we help people that have a full-time farm manager. They think we're there to take their job.
Yes.
When we're actually there to make
help
their
them.
job easier.
Yes.
They look at us like we're stepping on their toes. Well, they think I don't know what I'm doing. Well, instead of looking at it that way, take what advice we do have, and we may very well make things much easier for you, make your landowner happier with you, and you get paid more.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think, I don't think he would mind saying this, us talking about this, but, Mark and Misty and Brenner, like Dr. Kane's place, I mean, that's seems to be a very positive relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
He has never once seemed like he's been, offended or,
Nope.
Like you rubbing him the wrong way by offering up suggestions or anything like that. And he's actually even asked,
Oh, yeah.
hey, what would you do here? What do you think we needed to try here? And those sort of things. And that's been extremely positive, results.
And Dr. Kane is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Extremely successful, good at what he does, but he listens to people that knows about, other things. Whether it's, he's got farming help, on a couple of his pieces of property. He's got timber help. We do a lot of timber and burning and wildlife stuff for him. He listens to folks that he employs, or has as a consultant. He listens to them. Now, sometimes he'll change the game up and say, I really don't want to do that. Let's find another way to do it. And look, they own the dirt, so
sure.
You work for them.
That's right. Cool. Let's see. I got one more here. This is kind of relating to what we just came from at Ernie's place, but I wanted you to kind of maybe expand on some of this kind of stuff too. How long does it take to put together a proper management plan for a given property?
It depends.
It does depend. And I'll say
drastically.
This. Most of what I do is not a full-fledged management plan. Now, and I want to throw this out there while we got listeners hopefully paying attention. If you hire a consultant, I'm going to go there. There are shots fired. If you hire a consultant and they visit with you and they leave that place and they don't give you something in writing to help you, I wouldn't pay them. I wouldn't. If all they're going to do is show up and say, you need to do this, you need to do that, there's a lot that can get lost in communication and translation and forgetfulness, and 6 months later they're like, well, I know he said to do this, but I can't remember exactly. If they're not leaving you something in writing, then I wouldn't pay them a dime.
And I'm going to have a rebuttal on that just a wee bit. I've got a lot of clients that I left there and didn't leave, but I'm doing every single project.
Yes.
Yep.
There's a difference in consulting and doing the
Yes.
actual work.
Right. But I want to make sure people understand that.
Yes.
If your consultant's going to be doing your projects, then that plan that you're asking him to write is costing you extra when you don't really need it. If he's going to be the one, if she's going to be the one implementing the practices that's suggested.
If I'm handling all the management on a place or making sure that it's all getting done, they may not need it in writing.
Right.
But I still provide it.
Yep.
Because one, it gives us something to look at over time.
Look back at.
Yeah. So if a landowner calls me and says, hey, Matt, when you met with me 18 months ago, we looked at this acreage over here, I can pull it up on my computer and say, yeah, I know exactly what acreage you're talking about, and yes, this is what's written down, this is what we discussed, this is what we need to do.
Right.
But that is something that's always, I guess, crawled all over me, is people paying money, substantial sums of money for somebody to come tell them this is what you need to do and then leave, and there's nothing written, there's no guide.
Or if all you get's a map with some little bit of highlighted activity.
Right.
I mean, I try to.
Now, if that's what you pay for, and you pay a small sum,
right,
and you want a map and just some highlighted activities you need to do, then understand that's what you paid for. You may pay $2,000 or $3,000 for that. Shouldn't pay any more than that. But I've heard tell of some folks getting some maps and very, very short write-ups for $8,000 and $10,000, and look, would I love to make that kind of money off of that visit? Sure.
I'm not charging
Would
that.
I feel right?
No. I couldn't sleep at
Absolutely
night. I couldn't sleep at night doing that.
But in terms of a time frame, I guess, I mean, I know we talked about that kind of side of it, but like one example here is we just left Ernie's place, right, from Tethered. So we were here a year ago.
Yep.
You know, Jeremy and I, we came up here, we filmed some stuff, we walked the property, and, you know, kind of let Ernie just show us around.
Yeah.
And really didn't make any suggestions.
Very little.
And I think it sort of caught him off guard a little. Because he was like, well, I want a management plan.
Honestly, he was a little upset.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, you know, I wanted you to come up here and tell me what to do with this property, and we had to sort of explain, like, Ernie, you know, if you expect Jeremy or Matt or whoever to just set foot on your property and then make 15 recommendations on what you should do to it, I mean, it's, you know, and then leave, and we're there for 3 or 4 hours and then leave. It's just not. That's really not feasible,
especially without history.
No,
a big thing is history. If you've owned a tract for 2 or 3 years, you should have quite a bit of history with how deer act. You know, your wildlife populations, where they're moving, what needs work, what doesn't. But in Ernie's case, I think we showed up shortly after he purchased the place.
Yeah, I mean, he did not have the property very long at all.
He didn't know anything about any of the wildlife there. And, you know, my suggestion was, hey, look, learn this place for a year, and we're going to come back, and then we're going to give you some things
based on what you've got on trail camera, what you've seen with your own eyes when you hunt it, you know, all those sorts of things, and get an entire year under your belt, and then we can come back and start to put together something. But I think that's probably the misconception for a lot of people is like, I want you to show up, I want you to spend a day with me, and then I want you to tell me how to make this place amazing.
Yep.
And, you know,
especially on small acreage, and that it sounds to, you know, in my mind, it almost sounds counterintuitive that you want to tread lightly on smaller acreages versus big acreages. If you go on a place that you've never been on, it's a small acreage tract, and you have no earthly idea what the deer are doing, how they move, or turkeys, or whatever species it may be, and you go in and you wholesale start changing stuff on that tract, you may have changed everything that worked for that tract.
That's right.
If you're dealing with several hundred or thousands of acres,
you can mess up on a few.
Yeah.
You can mess up on a few and be okay.
You can booger a spot here or there.
There's just more
and
opportunities.
Be okay.
You know, there's less opportunities on smaller acreages.
Yep.
You know,
I mean, like the tract that we're working on there in North Alabama, close to home, that y'all have both been to. You know, I sold that tract immediately after selling that tract. We started working on it. I did have a little history with it, so it was a little different, but you know, there were a lot of things that needed to take place on that tract from an infrastructure standpoint and an accessibility and huntability standpoint. So we immediately got to work on those. But it has taken us 18 months to fine-tune all the decisions we wanted to make, where to put things, how to shape fields, where to put fields, how big to make them, and we're in the final touches of that. But it'll be a 2-year project, you know, before we're done.
Right. Well, and I also think too, there are certain things that are probably a little bit more obvious than others. And so, like you said, hey, access is, I mean, look, if you can't access the place, you can't use it. You can't hunt it, farm it, whatever. So, especially if you're talking about wildlife stuff, like, well, we know we've got to fix that. We know we've got to have some access.
Yep.
But we might not necessarily know what subdominant trees to pull out of this place yet. We may, you know what I mean? There's certain things that aren't quite as obvious and will require more time.
Well, and like on that tract that I'm referencing, there was 235 acres of pine timber that was 23 or 24 years old, I think, when we started logging, and basal area was 120 plus. I mean, look, anybody that's that's in the timber, wildlife, or habitat management business knows that timber needed to be thin.
Yep. That's a given.
Yeah, I mean, so that was something we put into place immediately. Let's get a forester out here. Let's cruise the timber. Let's get an idea of what we want to do. And Scott and I put together a plan on thinning the timber from a wildlife standpoint. And, man, off to the races we went.
For sure. But, yeah, I mean, I think kind of the overarching theme there is it does depend, how long it takes to develop a plan. But, I mean, in general, it's not fast.
No, and it's fluid. It's something that's fluid that needs to be revisited.
Right. And
constantly.
I mean, even the guys, in Seco were like, want you to come back every year, at least, if not maybe twice a year, just to kind of keep up with progress and see how things are trending. Are we getting better?
That was a very pleasant visit, just because they were already doing a lot of things that they should be doing.
Yep.
They just needed to know what to do to take it to the next level.
Right.
And I feel like we all learned a good bit from that visit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was just tweaking. It
was just fine-tuning what they were already doing.
That's right. I don't think they fully grasped the deer problem that they had or that they have.
They might, because when they when they ask, so how many deer y'all think we need to kill this year? 100? Like, that'd be a good starting point.
Yeah.
So
hey guys, if you're listening to this, we're not picking at you.
No, not picking at all.
But yeah.
God, that's a bunch of deer.
Like Mr. Oh, yeah. Like,
that's work. That becomes work.
Oh, it's a full-time freaking job.
Well, that's how I always thought when I was a kid that it was just so insane that people would, bring in guests to their club to shoot does because they just didn't want to do it. I'm like, dude, turn me loose. I'll shoot every one of them, But, now, okay, you kind of get it, man. If you've got to take 100 living, breathing deer off of that place, that's work.
Yep, it is.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's a job. So it does change perspective a little bit.
And look, that's not on a huge place.
Yeah, how many acres was that roughly?
A little over 1,000.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you go to taking that number of deer off of a tract that size, you got a lot of deer.
A
lot.
No doubt. Cool. Guys, is there anything else that you kind of want to just offer up for client suggestions, or anything like that before we close out? Is there anything that maybe clients ought to be, or potential clients ought to be wary of?
There's probably a bunch. I mean, one thing is do some background on who you're hiring.
Yeah.
And that's with anything.
Yep.
I mean, my gosh, you don't just, you might. I don't just take my truck to any shade tree mechanic. I want to know something about what's going on. But do some background. I mean, nobody has to do any background on Matt. I mean,
my gosh.
Because of his AL deer status, everybody knows who he is.
The legend.
But do a little background. Find out if they've worked in your area.
That's important.
If you call up to a consultant that's in Tennessee and say, man, look, somebody gave me your number. Have you ever done anything in Southwest Mississippi? And they go, nope, never been there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, probably start trying to find somebody that's in your location, or at least close, or has experience. I mean, there's a lot of consultants that's got experience all over the country. I would want to know what kind of experience they had all over the country. I mean, because we've been behind some folks that's got experience all over the country, and it didn't turn out well. But
Sure.
you know,
Well, again, this is, y'all take this with a grain of salt because I'm not a consultant, but I would say if you inquire about having a consultant come and do a site visit, something like that, and you just get an astronomical number, it just seems way. I mean, look, we're all out here trying to make a living, but you get a number that's just absurd. At least ask some questions.
no, absolutely.
What exactly does that include? What exactly are you going to do when you get here? And what's the expectation, that when this is all said and done, what are you, like Matt was saying, a written plan, what are you going to put in my hand at the end of this thing?
And I tell people when they call me, this is what it's going to cost and this is what I'm going to provide.
Right.
So that they know up front what they're paying for exactly.
And I don't know if what's astronomical may be a lot different to a lot of people. But if you're, my thought on that is if you hear a $5,000 plus for just a site visit and, a map and a little bit of a plan, you might need to think on that one and call around and check with some other folks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I know a lot of consultants out there other than us that provide great information, and it doesn't cost that much.
Right.
Now, if you want to pay that much, call me. I'll come do it for that much.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
And I'll kind of feel bad about it.
Tell me what you're willing to pay. I'll come do it.
Right. Well, guys, that's going to get us through about all the questions we got here. We're closing in on the opening day of archery season in Alabama at this point. We're getting close, so expect some more hunting-related content here in the future, and hopefully
we're banjoing with the new Dartons.
That's right.
Getting things ready.
That's right, man. Pretty excited about it. We all got the new sequel 33, and
our attempt is going to be to all be in the woods together opening weekend and maybe cutting some hair, drawing some blood.
Yeah, it would be awesome if we could get a triple on opening day, get that on video. Be pretty incredible.
Yeah, sitting in the same saddle.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So you guys just stay tuned. Again, we thank you so much for your support and for listening. If you haven't already, please follow, like, share, subscribe, all the things that social media guys like us need you to do. Do all the things. It really helps us out more than you know. But stay tuned. We got some more stuff coming your way, and we certainly appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.
Peace out.
Out.